This is PLAR English, and I'm Andrea. Tonight we're talking about three different things, assignment 21, 22, and 23. So I'll share an example of how to write a letter, specifically a personal business letter. And then I'll talk about assignment 22. There's just one page in your textbook to read for that in order to fill in one page in your workbook. So that should be, those first two should be pretty quick. And then I'm excited tonight because I will have a new example for assignment 23 for our short story summary. Oh, sorry, I should have mentioned that this class has been switched with PLAR Math because I was out of the office today at a career fair. All right, so this is PLAR English. So let's start off with letter writing. So this is from, this information here that I'm sharing is from the textbook on page 43. So I'll just read what the textbook has to say about letter writing. At various times in your life, you may need to write a letter. It might be to say thank you for a gift, or you may meet someone while on holidays that you wish to correspond with from time to time. One of your friends may move far away. There are countless reasons why you might write a personal letter. It could also be that you need to write a personal business letter directed on a personal level to a business, such as a letter of complaint or to thank a company for amazing service. So all a personal business letter is, and that's what we're talking about today, and this is the type of letter, a personal business letter that you need to write for assignment 21, is a letter that you are writing yourself and you are writing to a business or somebody in a business, asking them a question or complaining about something or thanking them, any of these examples. So that's what we're focusing on today. Now, your textbook also gives you another possibility, and just remember that what we're focusing on is a personal business letter, but the other possibility here is could involve you in writing a letter as a business letter, which is one organization to writing to another organization. For example, an organization you belong to, like Tikanagan, may write a letter to the school requesting the use of their gym for a special occasion. So they're just talking about here how two businesses might correspond with each other. They might write to each other. But what we're looking at today is when you are writing to a business for something or someone that's part of a business, right? Like you might write to your teacher, say, because your teacher is part of WASA and WASA is a business. All right, so the outline on the next page, I'll let you look at your textbook for that, shows the various components that should be included in any letter: the date, inside address, salutation, body of information, complimentary closing, signature, and sender information. You should become familiar with these components and their placement on the page as they are important letter writing skills. So today I'm going to share another example. So there's an example in your textbook, and you can check that out on your own time. But today I wanted to give you another example so that you'd have more information if you needed. And then we'll go into a little bit more detail about a few things that I think might be useful to know as well. Before I get to this example though, I just wanted to go over what your workbook has to say about this assignment. So what we're looking at now is page 42 from the workbook. So if we're looking at what the letter needs to have, it should have 3 paragraphs. So keep in mind that you still need to have all the parts of a letter, right? And we'll go through it. But if we're talking about the main content in the letter, right? You need to have at least these things. And the reason why your textbook, or sorry, your workbook organizes it this way is the purpose is to actually give you some hints on what you could write about. So the main part of a letter will have 3 paragraphs, right? So if we're talking about the middle part of the letter, we're talking about an opening paragraph, a middle paragraph, and a closing paragraph. So you can see here, if you're looking at the screen, that I already have colors that match, right? So for example, if I start off my opening paragraph and I explain that I'm an individual seeking employment, then in the middle paragraph, I would say what qualifications are required for a specific position, right? Or if I said that I was a student doing a research paper in the first paragraph, in the opening paragraph, Then in the middle paragraph, in the second paragraph, I would explain the topic of my research and the information that I'm hoping that the person can give me, right? Or a customer asking about products would be at the beginning, and then in the middle would be maybe you're asking about the warranty or the price. Or if you were, the fourth example that your workbook gives you is an adult interested in pursuing the credits required for a grade 12 diploma. So maybe you're writing it to WASA, maybe you're writing a letter to WASA Distance Education Center. And then so in the middle, you might ask about the courses that we offer and how much they might cost. So then the closing paragraph will always be the same. You notice I didn't match any colors here. So your closing paragraph needs to do three things. It needs to thank the person that's reading the letter for their attention. You need to be thankful. You need to give the person your contact information. And then you need to let the person know that you're hoping to hear from them somehow. Right? And I will give you some examples. Now, just going through this, when I'm marking it, I'm looking for obviously these main parts of your letter, right? So your opening paragraph is out of 2 marks. Now, something that I'll say about that is you need to address the letter to someone, right? Like, dear so-and-so, right? So if you haven't said who the letter's to, then I can't give you full marks for your opening paragraph because we don't really know who you're writing to. It's not clear who you're writing to, right? So 2 marks for that, right? Then the middle paragraph is out of 4 marks. So the middle part, the middle paragraph needs to have more detail than your opening paragraph. That's where you ask for more specific information, right? Depending on what you're writing your letter about. And then of course your closing paragraph will be out of 2 marks as well. And you should always sign your letter. Let's look at my example here. All right, let me just move this over a little bit so that we can see it. All right, so this is an example of a personal business letter. And right here. And there's another example in your textbook, and that's on page 44. So I wanted to go through my example here. So you always need a date at the top of your letter. And in this case, we've got everything on the left-hand side. And I've had questions before, well, can the date be on the right-hand side? Or can I move stuff around a little bit? Or for this assignment, use this kind of format where everything's on the left. It is possible to have the date with a placed on the right. There are letters that are written that way, but just to try to keep it all the same for everybody that submits this assignment, let's keep everything on the left. So you notice you start off with the date, whatever the date is, and I have May 16th, 2016. And then you have something called an inside address. So you put where it's going to. So if you were missing this address, I would tell you and I would decide, depending on how much the rest of the letter you had written successfully, I might ask you to resubmit. I mean, if your letter isn't structured properly, depending on how much work you've done for it, I don't know, it would depend, right? I mean, you know, if you're not used to writing a letter, you know, then it's an opportunity to learn too, right? So I don't know, it depends. So I have my address, you have the person's name, so I have Cheryl Davis, and then I have her role, computer sales representative, and then I have where, Wilson's Business Solutions, and I have the street address, 19 15th Avenue, and then the city and province and postal code, Sioux Lookout, Ontario, POT 1MO. So that's what the inside address looks like. And then you have something called a greeting or salutation. So I have Dear Ms. Davis here. And something really important here is that you always put a colon after your salutation, right? So colon looks like 2 dots, in case anyone can't see that. So you want to make sure that you put a colon there. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, how did I know to address it to a Ms. Davis? Well, I put some notes here on the left this is extra, this isn't in your textbook. If you address it to a Mr. somebody, then you're addressing it to a male, any male. And if you're addressing it to Mrs., that means that you have a married female that uses her married name. And if you're talking about Ms., then it could be an older female, uh, um, or if you're unsure if the female's married, you'd say Ms. Or if you're unsure if she uses her married name, right? So I always say to people, you know, refer to me as Ms. Cole because I'm married, but I keep my maiden name, right? So it'd be weird to be called Mrs. Cole because I have a different married name. So anyway, so Miss would be for a young unmarried female. So basically, if you're not sure whether to use Mrs., Ms., or Ms. or Miss, just use Ms., right? If you don't know how old the person is, if you don't know if they're married, if you don't know if they keep their name, and you know it's a female, address the person as Ms. MS, a period. And then here we have, so here's the body of my letter. So I say, Dear Ms. Davis, a greeting. I have an iPad and a PC, and I am hoping to find a way of transferring files between devices without saving them on an online database. Please recommend a few products that I could use. I am looking for something similar to a USB drive. Please include product descriptions and costs. Thank you for your help. Please see my contact information below. So my opening paragraph, my very first paragraph here, gives some quick information, a quick explanation of what I'm looking for, right? And then in the middle, I get more specific. So I specifically ask for some recommendations. I specifically say what I'm thinking that I need. And then I even ask for description and a cost, right? For anything that might be recommended. All right, and then at the end here, I have, I thank the person. I say, thank you for your help. Please see my contact information below. Now, I could improve this. I could add, I hope to hear from you soon, right? I could add that on to the end, and then that would give all three things for the closing, right? I'm saying thank you, I'm sharing my contact information, and I'm letting the person know that I hope to hear from them, right? So that would be that would make my last paragraph even better. And then you can see I have a closing, right? A complimentary closing. I say sincerely. And you always put a comma after your closing, sincerely, and then I signed my name underneath. And for a personal business letter, sincerely works really well. So if you're not sure what kind of closing to use, I mean, you could say something like best regards, right? That would work. But sincerely is fine. Just use sincerely. That's what I recommend. And then you put in your name and your address. So I've made this up, right? I've got my name, and I say 789 Green Street, and I've got my address in Thunder Bay, and then I just put in, it's just a 000 phone number here, and then I put in my email. So that's what a letter looks like. This is a good example of how your letter should be formatted, right? With the date and the address and the greeting and the information and the closing and your signature and then your address. All right, so now we can move on to assignment 22. So what this is, just to explain it, is you read the information in your textbook, and then you go and fill in assignment 22 in your workbook. I'm just going to skip ahead and show you what assignment 22 looks like in your workbook. This is assignment 22 in your workbook. So you notice here, a big hint is that there are 4 things to say, okay? And what you need to do, it says, list at least 4 points using your own words. That's the key, okay? So you read read the textbook, read the textbook page, and then explain the 4 steps in your own words. And I will give you even more hints about how this can be done. So let's go back now to the textbook. So the biggest thing that should help you here is to realize that we have some text in bold. It's darker than the other text. So if we look at number 1, I'm just going to underline it. One of the most important things you need to be able to do is identify the major points of the article. I could keep reading, right? But that's what you need to know. That's what you need to, you take that information and you explain it in your own words. And then number 2, the next important thing you need to be able to do is restate the major points in your own words. So you're going to say this, right? When you fill out number 2, you're going to say this, but you're going to say it in your own words, right? So you might say something like, tell people the most important information using your words. Something like that. I'll give you another example when we get there. But that's what you're doing. You're reading this and you're writing it out, but you're using your own words to write it out. It's actually pretty simple as long as you understand what you to do with the assignment here. So finally, so this is number 3. Finally, when you summarize, you should not put in your own thoughts about the article or essay, nor should you add any opinions. All right, so a summary is not about sharing your thoughts and opinions, right? It's about just sharing information. Summarizing is just taking what you read and explaining what you read in your own words. That's all it is. That's what number 3 is saying. So I might say something like, you know, do not include any of your thoughts or opinions, just the facts that you read. Number 4, it says, if you want to include a small part of the article into your summary, always put quotation marks around what you are copying directly. All right, so maybe you're reading a story and you want to take some of the words from the story. And actually, when I show you my example of a summary, I think I have a case where I think I might. But I'll make sure I give you an example anyway, just in case I haven't. I believe I did one. So basically, you know, you read something and you like some of the words and you want to use a few of the words, not all of them, right? You just a few, maybe like a little phrase that's said. You would put quotation marks around that, right? And later on, if you ever write, say, a research paper in the future, we don't get into research papers in this course, but if you ever get into writing research papers, you'll learn more about doing something called citing your sources, which is just where you use quotation marks, you know, and then when you're done, you use some brackets to show where you got that information from. All right, so and then it just goes on to talk about how you don't want to copy too much, right? You just take a few words. It's okay to take a few words, because if you take too much, and especially if you don't say where you got it from, that's called plagiarism, right? Those are the 4 main points. The textbook also says, it gives you a reminder. It actually reminds you down here about step 2, right? Right, so this is the same as step 2 down here. Right, and again, step 2 says the next important thing you need to be able to do is restate the major points in your own words. Okay, so obviously I don't want you to copy my example, but I want to give you an example so you can see what it could look like, right? So this is how I would explain the four important points from the textbook, right? So just remember to write them out in your own words. You take those words that are bold And actually, I underlined them today. I think it'll be easier to see. So the four things that I would say, this is how I would explain it. I would say refer to the central and main ideas of the original piece. That's what I would say. All right. Or maybe you might say something like focus on the main idea. Number two, I said use your own wording, right? Or you could say something like explain in your own words. All right. So it can be similar, but I should see an attempt to use your own words, right? So this assignment's worth 8 marks. You get 2 marks for each number, right? So let's say that you didn't use any of your own words. You would only get 4 out of 8 for that. But if you tried, right, and you did a good job and everything that you said made sense, you get full marks, right? Number 3, I say, this is how I would explain it. Do not put in your opinion of the issue or topic discussed in the original piece. So another way to say this is do not include opinions, just facts. Right? Number 4, this is how I would explain it. If you have to use some words from the original piece, put quotation marks around them. Right? Another thing that you could say is use quotation marks if you need to use a few of the words from what you read. So that's another way to explain it. So really, assignment 22 just asks you to write the information from the textbook in your own words. So you take those 4 points that are in bold and you explain them in your own words. And then assignments 23 and 24, and we're talking about assignment 23 next, ask you to write different types of summaries. All right, so let's get going on assignment 23. I'm excited because this is a new example. I haven't shared this example yet this year, and I thought I couldn't wait anymore. I just wanted to share it with you. I hope you enjoy it. I think it's funny and enjoyable. Before I get started, just a couple of things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the author of the story soon. But I wanted to mention that this is a true story. It's a true short story, and it features a real person. So I'm sharing a story tonight. It's called Gold Medals and Holy Night, and it was written, he's no longer with us, by a wonderful man by the name of Doc Skinner. And pictured on the right here, and this picture for anyone watching is a young boy. You see a young boy named Tim Skinner here. And we see 1953 Music Festival gold medal winner, boys and girls vocal solo. And then we learn a little bit about a one-stop sportsman's center, a gift and souvenir shop called Skinner's Acre. So this is a business that was owned originally by Doc Skinner, and now Tom Skinner and his wife have taken over that. So a friendly voice in fishing since 1953. So it's been around for a long time. So anyway, pictured on the right, this little boy here is Tim Skinner. Have I been saying Tom? Is Tim Skinner, and he is Doc Skinner's oldest son, and Tim Skinner, the son, is mentioned in the story. And we will actually get to hear him sing later because he still sings today. So even back when he was young, he sang, and he still sings today. So I thought that would be fun. I'd like to thank Tim Skinner for sharing some of his recent music with me. I'll share one of the songs with you at the end, and also for giving his permission to share his father's story. All right, so just to explain what we're doing here. So after reading the story, we will go through an example of how to summarize it. So just remember that when you do assignment 23, you will be reading a different story from your textbook. It's called the journal, and then you will summarize that story. Right? So this is just an example to explain how to go about summarizing a short story. So in next class, I'm actually going to share other examples that have been shared this year. In the previous terms, I summarized a short story called Bush, and our special guest Jane Antoniak she might be able to join us this term. It's still being determined. Um, but um, but she had also discussed another story that she wrote. So if she's not able to join us, if I find out she's not able to join us, then I'll share that the example that she and I discussed when she was here as well, right? So you'll have lots of examples. In my opinion, I think that assignment 23 is the most challenging, and you'll understand why as I go through tonight's class. So the other thing I want to do before I start reading the story is just tell you a little bit about the author. So this story that I'm sharing with you has been reprinted with permission, and actually it should say Tim Skinner, but because Doc Skinner's no longer with us, I asked his son, his oldest son, for permission. So the book is called Storyteller and Certified Liar. And the story is specifically from pages 7 to 9. And the book was published by the Highway Bookshop in Cobalt, Ontario. That bookshop no longer exists. But anyway, so it's a really old story. I think you'll enjoy it. And the story again is called Gold Medals and Holy Night. So let me just tell you a little bit about what Doc Skinner was like, so you get an idea of where this story comes from. So he was born in Toronto, Ontario in 1912. He worked as a farmhand on farms from Windsor to Muskoka, Ontario. He was a teenage lumberjack in the last of the virgin white pine in the Hollow Lake, Dorset area of Muskoka. I don't, I'm not a history person, but so he worked in a specific area. And something that I thought, I think everything's interesting, but it says here and this is from the back of the book, by the way, he attended 10 different schools to obtain grade 7. He settled in Long Lac in the fall of 1937 to 1938 at age 27. And then he worked for 21 years for Pulpwood Supply Cooperative, I think. And so it's now, and then it was later named Kimberly Clark of Canada. So he worked as a strip boss, equipment operator, camp foreman, and yard foreman. Then he met and married Lillian Raleigh of Fort William. So we're talking in Thunder Bay, right? Secretary for the company. So 1940, he raised 5 sons. So, so you know, a working man, a large family. And it talks about how he served on the Long Lock Council for 15 years. Um, Retired in 1959. So you know, he led a full life, and what I like about this story is that I think it's really funny, and it's very unique because you know, he worked in the bush, and I think it's a really good story to summarize because he has a very specific writing style, as you'll see. And so when we go and try to summarize this and explain the story in our own words, I think it's actually easier because his style is so unique that when we try to explain it, we're not going to explain things the same way that he did, right? So, so anyway, so let me get started here. So gold medals and holy night. Every time I watch someone on TV receiving a gold medal or read about it in the newspaper, I get the queer feeling something unusual is going to happen to the recipient or those closely related to him or her. I think the unusual feeling the adult Skinners get from gold medals goes back about a quarter century, back to when our #1 son won a gold medal for singing in the Geraldton Music Festival. We think he won the thing fair and square and didn't fault the lad when he hit his high notes. He was only 7 at the time, and I don't think he sang that loud on purpose. There were those who claimed he sang loud because his new cowhide boots hurt him. Others said it sounded as if he was hollering for bread, and I say, regardless of what anyone else says, the real gold medal test should have been based on a trip we made with his parents and younger brothers, numbers 2 and 3. I am sure his mother would have won the medal hands down for bravery over and above the call of duty. Lil and I and the 3 boys had spent a pleasant Christmas with her folks at Fort William, and, as we headed east for Long Lac, all indications were it would be a routine trip. So it was until we turned off at Nipigon and took Highway 11 for home. That is when the number one son, the gold medal winner, started out with an endless rendition of Holy Night. And that is about the time it started to snow. It seemed the louder he sang, the larger the snowflakes became, and my gentle request that he tone it down before I broke his windpipe, voice box and all, seemed to fall on deaf ears. Lil, my co-pilot, was more interested in where the road was, and I can't say I blame her for her concern, as it was the first time I had ever seen snowflakes almost the size of Boston cream pies. They came floating down from the sky like giant mushrooms, and as they hit the windshield, made a sound like a dull splat, just like one getting hit in the face with a wet dish rag. I also noticed along a cedar swamp we passed, near Lake Helen, the rabbits had runways 6 feet off the ground among the snowflakes. This is when the 47 Chevy windshield wipers gave up. They just couldn't hack the heavy snow, so I pulled gently to the side of the road to wait out the storm. In the meantime, there had been some audience reaction to the continuous rendition of Holy Night from the podium in the rear seat. Number 2 son had stood it as long as he could and had thrown up. Number 3 son apparently got scared and messed himself. The only one who seemed to have things under control was the co-pilot. That was until she put her head under the dash to get the Kleenex. It was then the heater fan sucked her kerchief she was wearing inside of a hat into the interior of the heater, thus hiding her head in an awkward position almost on the floor of the car. This caused all hell to break loose again in the rear seat. I think the inmates thought I was going to cut their mother's head off to get her loose. Little did they know the knife I had hauled from my pocket and opened was to be used for cutting a tag alder, which I intended to use to beat Holy Night into absolute silence later on. Eventually, I got the co-pilot back into the control room, a little worse for wear, but still smiling. The 2 young ones were cleaned up and changed. The snow had let up at last, and the boy soprano was quietly catching his second wind. I informed the co-pilot we were about to resume our journey. She said it was a good idea, right after she had fed the baby. This took about 15 minutes, but the fun was not over yet. Not by a long shot. No, sir. There was about half a can of strained spinach left after feeding the young chap. Lil asked what she could do with it. I told her to throw it out the window. This she did, but she forgot to roll the window down first. I think she was still shook up after being hung up in the heater. Once again, it was cleanup time in the Chevy, but this time it was different. There was no sign of mutiny by the crew, and best of all, no Holy Night. I think the discipline was due to the 5-foot tag alder I cut and placed in the seat twixt me and the co-pilot. The balance of the trip home was uneventful. The tag alder more than earned its passage to Long Loch, and never did the old homestead look so warm and welcome as it did that night when we hove into the yard and prepared to disembark. So I just wanted to go through and just go through each page and explain a few things that I think might be important before we start summarizing this. A lot of times at the very beginning of the story, the author will set the scene. And this means that maybe you get a little bit of history. Maybe you learn a little bit about the characters. Maybe you learn a little bit about the setting. In this case, we get some history on the characters. So in this case, setting the scene means that we learn a little bit about the family so that we can then go ahead and appreciate the story more, right? So the fact that the oldest son won a gold medal in the music festival in Geraldton, and then proceeded in this story to drive everyone crazy while they dealt with the snow and the driving, makes it funny. But if we're summarizing this, the story actually starts on the second page, right? What we're reading on the first page is just background information, all right? So the story hasn't started yet, right? So that's important to know, right? No actions have happened. This is just information. This is just stuff that we know from the past that's being shared with us. And then we actually get to where they're actually driving in the car and they get stuck in the snow, right? Okay, so here on the second page that I have here is where the story actually begins, right? And so just to be clear, what ended up happening here is the oldest son was singing and he was driving everybody crazy, and at the same time the snow was falling too much and they had to pull the car over, and then a whole bunch of other things happened, which we learn as we go through, right? No matter what they did, they still things kept happening, funny things kept happening, and then they finally get back on the road. And if anyone's wondering, I know I had to look this up because I had never heard of a tag alder. Based on my research, it's like a large shrub. Um, and um, and so like they can get really big. So from what I understand is he had this shrub, and he took it and put it in between the two boys. And just to sort of help explain why that might have been useful, I remember my older brother and I, my parents would take us up on a lot of trips together, and they would help us, get along with each other by basically separating us. They would put like a box of toys in between us so that we wouldn't argue with each other, so that we'd play with the toys instead. So I mean, I think it's kind of the same thing. Well, not the same thing, but the same kind of idea where, well, it's a little bit more extreme here. He took a giant shrub and put it in between, right? So they couldn't really move that much, right? So anyway, so that's kind of how I would explain the story. And so now when we talk about summarizing this, there's three steps that you can follow. This is how I would explain it. So you start off with a topic sentence. So what is that? It's when you explain the story in one sentence. And with your topic sentence, what you want to do is you want to include the title of the story, and you also want to explain who and what the story is mainly about. Now, here's a note here. Every person, so anyone who reads any story, will interpret that story a little bit differently. So this is why I'm going to share two different possible summaries for this same story, because there's no one way to summarize it, right? We could interpret the story differently, meaning that we could explain it a little bit differently depending on what we know, right? I mean, I had to research what a tag elder was for me to understand the story, right? Um, and then, now, of course, I won't be including any of my opinions, right? I mean, I have an opinion on why his method worked, but I'm not including any of that. I'm just talking about what happened in the story. So after you explain in one sentence the story, that's your topic sentence, right? Then you get to the important points. So in the middle of your summary, you'll have what happened from, like, the actions that happened from the beginning to the end. Now, here's a tip to start with point form in your outline, because in your workbook there will be an outline to fill out. And then just write your full sentences when you write the final paragraph, right? So then your concluding sentence will be similar to the topic sentence, but not the same. Okay, so the easiest way to explain this is to look at the first possibility here. All right, so maybe you read the story and you think, okay, this story is all about a challenging drive that the family experienced, right? Remember, they got stuck in the snow and all this, so you're focusing on how challenging that experience was. So maybe you have a topic sentence like this. Remember, I mentioned that you want to put the title of the story in your topic sentence. So I use quotation marks around the title of the story. So I say, this is my example: in Gold Medals and Holy Night, the author shares an experience that he had with his family driving in a winter snowstorm, right? And actually, sometimes when you read it a second time, you realize things, right? I sort of got this. I should have read it a third time. I only had time to read the story twice, and that's okay, right? I mean, you might need to read a story several times before you can get all the details right. So the important points, the main things that happened, and this is just point form. These are not complete sentences yet, right? I'll show you the whole thing when I'm done here. So, we start out, with the eldest son singing and snow falling heavily, and how, sorry, not the son, it was the father, right? The father pulled the car over, right? And then the back seat, the boys in the back seat could not stand the singing. And then, of course, the wife's kerchief got stuck in the heater, right? And then the snow calmed down, but then a mess was made when feeding the baby, right? And then, the father found a way to calm the kids down, and they made it home. So that would be the main things that happened from the beginning to the end of the story. And then if I'm giving a concluding sentence at the end, it's like a reminder. That's another way to think of a concluding sentence. So it's similar to the topic sentence, but it's not the same. So this is what I have for a concluding sentence. So this story is all about how the family got through a challenging winter drive, right? So it's similar. It reminds us about the family being together and the driving and it being winter, but I've used slightly different words. So what would this look like put together? Okay. So this is everything put together. And what's great is, I just read the story, so you know how unique the writer's style is, and you can see that I've really had to change the wording for the story. It's how I would explain what happened. In Gold Medals and Holy Night, the author shares an experience that he had with his family driving in a winter snowstorm. The trouble started after his eldest son started singing, as the snow started falling heavily. After he, right, it wasn't his wife, after he pulled the car over, the other boys in the back seat were sick from the sound of their brother singing. Next, Lil was nearly sucked into the car heater as she reached for a Kleenex. Luckily, the snow calmed down and they would be back on the road after feeding the baby. But of course, the feeding led to Lil accidentally throwing half a can of strained spinach at a closed car window. So that was cleaned up, and the boys were calm for the rest of the drive, after their father placed the tag alder, a large shrub, in between them. So this story is all about how the family got through a challenging winter drive. So you can see how, I've got my topic sentence and my concluding sentence that explains the whole thing in one sentence, right? My topic sentence includes the title of the story in it, and my concluding sentence doesn't, and it's similar but not exactly the same, right? So remember, I started off with, in Gold Medals and Holy Night, the author shares an experience that he had with his family driving in a winter snowstorm. And then I share the details in my own words, and then I finish with something like, so this story is all about how the family got through a challenging winter drive. So let's look at another possibility. Another way that we can look at this is we can say that this story is all about the bonds of family, how a family can get through anything with a strong bond. So maybe this time my topic sentence is, in Gold Medals and Holy Night, the authors or the father's family has a strong bond, which helps them through a challenging winter drive. So I've changed my perspective a tiny bit, right? I mean, they're an incredible family, right? They got through all that crazy singing and the crazy weather. So my important points are a little tiny bit different because my perspective's a little different. So I say the father is patient. Singing causes conflict and the snow falls heavily. The wife is strong, escapes the heater, right? Feeds the baby, all right, she actually doesn't get the car moving again. He gets the car moving again, so that's okay, not a big deal. Then the boys are, in the end, they're obedient because the father is creative, right? The weather calms down and they make it home. So you see how my important points are more focused on the qualities that the different characters demonstrate throughout the story that helps them bond, right? So it's slightly different. Concluding sentence example. So this story shows how a strong family bond can help get through anything. So here's everything put together. In Gold Medals and Holy Night, the author's or father's family has a strong bond, which helps them through a challenging winter drive. To begin with, the father is patient with his sons, even after the eldest one refuses to stop singing, and the younger ones could not stand the sound. The snow falls heavily, and they pull over to wait out the storm during a second round of singing. The wife also stays strong even after nearly getting caught in the heater and accidentally throwing half a can of strained spinach at a closed window. Okay. So instead of she, right, maybe say the father, right? The father manages to the father the father manages to get the car moving again after the snow calms down. Luckily, the boys are obedient for the rest of the trip. After the father places a 5-foot tag alder, a large shrub, in between them, they make it home safely. So this story shows how a strong family bond can help get through anything. So after my third reading, I realized that it was the father that was driving. I know it said that the wife was the co-pilot, but it took me a while to figure that out. All right, and that's okay. Don't be afraid to read a story several times if you need to. Right. So basically, the father was driving, the wife was sitting in the front beside him, and the boys were in the back. And he and the wife was trying to help with the baby, and and she almost got stuck in the heater and all those things, but the father was the one driving, so he was the one that got the car moving again when everything calmed down. All right, so I'm just going to explain quickly what to work on, and then we'll end by listening to Tim Skinner sing. So this is what you should try to finish by our next class on Monday, May 29th. Assignment 21, write a letter. Remember, we talked about a personal business letter. And so to do that, you need to read textbook pages 43 to 44, and then you'll be filling out workbook pages. Well, I think there's just one page where you actually write your letter on it. If you need any more room, if you don't have enough room, you can always grab a sheet of lined paper and use that, or you could finish off on the back. I know some people were kind of running out of room. They didn't quite have enough room, and they've been asking me, what do I do if I don't have enough room? You don't want your letter to be any more than a page, right? But because the lines are really big and there's lots of space in between them, you might not quite have enough because it's like a lined sheet of paper. So you can always take a different sheet of paper and write it on that and hand that in instead if you'd like to. Second thing, assignment 22, that's those steps to summarize. I gave you an example of how you're reading the information on page 46 of your textbook, and then you take that information and you explain it in your own words. So there's 4 things that are in bold that your textbook says. You take those 4 things, you explain them in your words, and then you fill out the workbook on page 45. Assignment 23, we just finished talking about short story summary, gave you an example. Remember, you're looking at textbook pages 47 to 50, and part of those pages you'll read the story called The Journal. And then when you're done that, then you go to your workbook, pages 46 to 47. So there's an outline, and then at the very end is where you write out your full final paragraph with, right, make sure that you're using complete sentences and that you have enough details and that you have a good topic sentence and a good concluding sentence. All right, so this is one song from Tim Skinner's CD. Here you can see that this one was from July 2016. Thank you again, Tim, for sharing all of this with me, and yeah, so hopefully you enjoy.
Unfortunately, due to complicated U.S. copyright law and unclear Content ID information in YouTube, I am not able to share the recording of Tim singing with you here on my YouTube channel. However, WASA students who attended the class obviously got to hear him sing, and WASA students who were not able to attend class who would still like to hear him sing can contact me for more information. Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. Have a good night. Bye.